Hello and welcome to all of you to our podcast Radio Offside. We promised you a special surprise. And well, this surprise has been coincided with Christmas and Yalda. The surprise is an interview with David Amoyal. David is a columnist for ESPN and The Athletics. He's also a reporter and translator for the Marzio website. I know David from his amazing podcast Culture Land. Every week in Culture Land, David talks about Italian football and culture in general. Talking with David is a great honor for me. Right now, Reshad is here with me to talk with David. Let's start the interview. Hi, David.
Hello. It's a real pleasure to be on your show. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. Thank you for accepting our invitation today.
Absolutely. It's great to talk culture with you guys. You guys know it's always a pleasure for me.
Thank you a lot. So if we want to talk about Serie A, we should start with the elephant in the room, which is Juventus right now. A lot of Juventus fans were unhappy with Allegri. They wanted a coach who utilizes more offensive tactics. And he was blamed a lot for getting kicked off Champions League last year against Ajax. So Juventus signed a contract with Sarri, who's known for his attacking style of football. What do you think about that? Do you think Sarri is Juve material?
So I'm a big fan of Maurizio Sarri in general. I will say it was an odd appointment. I mean, I've been following Calcio and Juve for a very long time. Juve once went with a manager that had somewhat of a similar profile than Sarri, so someone known for playing an offensive style, maybe hadn't won a lot of trophies, and this was Gigi Manfredi in the 90s. He only lasted 1 year. Now, I think Sarri is a much better coach than him. So, when you think of Juve managers, Allegri, I would say, is much more the classic Juve manager, very good defensively, very organized. Allegri really knew how to manage the media, rarely said something that would generate any controversy. Now, Sarri is very different. He was known for an offensive style, was known for making some colorful statements at times. At Juve, we haven't seen much of that. But I was a surprising hire, but I think Juve really wanted to improve in the Champions League, as you mentioned. And when you look at the recent winners of the Champions League, it's teams that played more of a free-flowing attacking style. I also think the 1 year at Chelsea was really, really important for Sarri. I don't think he could have gone from Napoli to Juve. Even he wouldn't have done that leaving because of the rivalry between the two, but he became more polished at Chelsea for sure. I think also his style of play at Chelsea, I think you wouldn't find that many Chelsea fans who would say it was particularly entertaining. So I think it's safe to say Juve has changed Sarri more than Sarri has changed Juve so far. But I will say, Juve fans were obsessed with the Champions League, and Sarri, I think Juve's best performances were in the Champions League. They won their group with one match to go. In my lifetime, I mean, it's probably happened before, but I don't remember Juve getting off to such a good start in the Champions League. They were lucky with the draw against Lyon. They are a safe bet to make it to the quarterfinals. I only see Liverpool as clearly better. So if Juve fans were obsessed with the Champions League, I think so far Sarri has more than done his part with that.
And how much do you think the managers are going to stand by him? So they just lost Super Cup to Lazio. What if they don't win Serie A this year and also get kicked off UCL? Is it possible that they sack him, especially if they see that Pep is leaving Man City and is looking for a new club?
Yeah, I mean, I think Guardiola is the exception. I don't know how many other managers. Say Juve doesn't win anything this season. I don't think that'll be the case. But let's say Juve loses and they lose the Scudetto to Inter and Conte. Now that in and of itself would be a tough blow. Obviously, it's the biggest rival. They're former managers. That would be worse than, say, losing to Napoli had Ancelotti had a great season. Say they get eliminated in the quarterfinals or even by Lyon, shocking elimination. Juve are typically pretty patient with their managers, but yeah, especially if someone like Pep or maybe Pochettino is available to Juve, it's possible. But I will say, I personally think overall Sarri has done well. I mean, Lazio just seemed to have his number. I mean, Inzaghi and Lazio have done very well against Juve, and this was even before Sarri. Sarri seems to struggle with these teams that play like a 3-5-2. He struggled against Atalanta when Gasperini was there, when he was at Napoli. Lazio now. So has Juve been as exciting as we thought offensively? No, but let's also Ronaldo up until his streak recently not having a great season either. They were without Douglas Costa. They were without Ramsey for most of the year. Chiellini hasn't been there. So Juve's dealt with a lot of adversities. They've only lost, 2 games, both to Lazio. They are tied for first place in Serie A. They are in first place in the Champions League, did really well. I think a lot of this, though, has to do with Conte being at Inter, and that obviously makes Juve fans more triggered, for sure.
Yeah. And so do you think Juve's squad is the kind of squad that Pep would go for? I mean, when I look at it, their goalkeepers, I think, are not Pep's type of goalkeepers. And also, their attackers are not Pep's style. Also, their fullbacks, I think, they're not really good for Pep's style. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, they sold a player, João Cancelo, who we thought would have been perfect for Pep, and then you look at City, he really hasn't played much. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I mean, I think Cuadrado and Alexandro, pretty good for Pep's. You have Pjanic, who he's liked and he's tried to sign in the past. I think Bentancur kind of fits that. Douglas Costa certainly fits his style of play. I would say Dybala. So no, actually, I think they have a decent amount of players that would be appealing to him. And look, I think beyond that, in Serie A, Juve is the most appealing job for him. If he wanted to come to Italy, I don't really see him going anywhere else. If Inter didn't have Conte, maybe. I think Milan's just too far down. Maybe Roma with a new ownership would be attractive. So I think more than the squad, at the end of the day, the Juve job in Italy is still the most attractive. I would say it's one of the most attractive jobs in all of Europe. So if it were to be available, I don't think Pep would be too worried of the squad per se.
And let's go back to Sarri for a little while. Don't you think he has man management problems as someone who's in charge of a big club like Juve? I mean, it showed itself when he substituted Ronaldo. Like Zidane, for example, used to take Ronaldo off the pitch a lot without it becoming a big media talking point.
I actually think Sarri, a lot of the things that you would have been concerned about him when he arrived at Juve, I think in a lot of ways he's addressed them all. I mean, for one, Juve has been much more pragmatic under Sarri than we thought they would. They've won. I mean, a lot of the games look like Allegri's Juve, doing the bare minimum to win. I think he's been very measured with his statements. He very rarely said things that were out of line, while at Napoli he did that a lot. I think he's rotated his squad a lot, certainly a lot more than we expected. The team hasn't been as offensively fun as we thought, but again, this is Juve, and Juve is going to change managers. So, no, I would say the thing with Ronaldo, I give him a lot of credit for taking him out when he did. You mentioned Zidane at Real Madrid, but Zidane is Zidane at Real Madrid. I mean, the guy's got a lot of cachet. Sarri at Juve, I really respected him for do that. I think he was proven right. I mean, you look at Dybala, he's completely reinvigorated him. And, with Dybala, Juve was willing to sell him in the summer. And I have to say, I'm a big Dybala fan, but in the summer, I could totally see why Juve wanted to move on, and he's reinvented him. So I know there's a lot of people that are very upset with Sarri, but I think these are a lot of the people that were disappointed Pep didn't come. And I think he's done pretty well. But again, I always like to tell my biases. Sarri's been probably my favorite figure in Italian football in a long time. So I might defend him more than others would.
And last question about Juventus. It's about their midfield area. This summer, they spent more than 100 million euros on their defense line by bringing De Ligt and Demiral. But for their midfield, which has been their problem since Pogba and Pirlo left the club, they signed only Ramsey and Rabiot, both on Bozeman signings, and even they didn't get much time to play. I don't understand, why aren't they prioritizing their midfield area?
It's a good question, and hindsight is 2020. I don't think De Ligt's been nearly as bad as Twitter would say, but has he been great? No, he hasn't. Demiral's been quite good the few times he played, so I guess it would be hindsight 2020 to say, you know what? Bonucci's having a really good season. Juve would have been fine with Bonucci, Demiral, even with Chiellini hurt. They should have spent the money on Pogba, Milinkovic-Savic. I think you'd be fine to say that now. The Bosman deals, Ramsey, when he's been healthy, has been pretty good, but him being healthy is very rare. Rabiot, has some mental issues that Sarri hasn't been afraid to point out in press conference. I mean, I agree the midfield has been an issue for a while. In a way, they've been lucky that it could be even worse because Bentancur has been quite good for them. And Bentancur kind of came out of nowhere. A lot of people criticized Juve letting Tevez go back to Boca Juniors, but it worked out really well because Bentancur has been excellent. So I hear you. I do think, though, if Juve is hitting on all cylinders, Chiellini's back, De Ligt gets more experience, you have Bonucci, with that great attack that they have, if they can have even just one out of Ramsey and Douglas Costa healthy, I'm not saying both, I do think they have enough in the midfield with Pjanic, Bentancur, and then you hope that either Matuidi or Rabiot can get it going. I mean, not on Twitter, some people rate Khedira. So I hear you. I think, though, beyond this season in general, Juve hasn't done enough to bolster their midfield. I think a lot of the Bosman deals that Juve was all praised for years, I think now people are starting to look at Bosman deals differently. It's not just Rabiot and Ramsey. I mean, you look even Godin at Inter, he's been okay. He's not been a totally difference maker either. So I think in general, the Bosman deals don't look as great as they did, when you were getting Pirlo and Pogba. Now, obviously, it looks great if you can do that.
Do you think they would go for Eriksen from Tottenham this summer?
Yeah, I do. I think Juve would be gun shy on other Bosman deals, but I think Eriksen is a step above on Rabiot. I'm not a big Premier League expert. I mean, he definitely is healthier than Ramsey. But yeah, I think Juve will continue to try to dominate that Bosman market. I mean, Juve, if there's a club who has great relationships with agents across the board, it's Juve. And so that's why you see them being so strong on that market.
And what about Haaland? Do you think he's an attacker, I know, but do you think they have a shot of getting Haaland right now, or would he go to Bundesliga?
So the thing about him, it's kind of like De Ligt. I think if it wasn't for Mino Raiola being his agent, I would say Juve has no chance at all. I personally didn't think Juve had much of a chance on De Ligt. When Barcelona, PSG were linked to him, I was like, they're going to get him. But Juve has a great relationship with Raiola. They are willing to give Raiola commissions and concessions that maybe other clubs wouldn't. I wouldn't go as far as saying they're the favorites to sign Haaland, but I think they are in the mix mainly because of their relationship with Raiola. He wants to play. I think at Man United he has more of a chance. I still think Leipzig, because of their relationship with Salzburg, they're owned by the same owners, he's so young. If you put a gun to my head, I think that's the most likeliest for a year or two, and then we'll see him at a big club in the Premier League. But Juve will always be in the mix because of the Raiola factor. Honestly, Juve fans should. I know a lot of Juve fans don't like Raiola, but the guy's done a lot of good things for Juve. I mean, even Pogba, I know a lot of Juve fans are upset that he left, but he brought him to Juve for essentially nothing, sold him for an insane profit. De Ligt arrives at Juve, and granted, right now the dividends aren't there yet, but he's done a lot of good things to help Juve. And he's been paid accordingly to do so, too. It wasn't charity work either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I was a Juve fan, I would be happy with Raiola. Yeah. So let's talk about Inter Milan.
Yeah.
I have a question about their management. When Marotta was in Juve, he had Paratici to advise him on which players to sign, and he was just managing the financial side of new contracts. Does he have someone like that in Inter too? Who is advising him on football side of things now in Inter?
So Marotta was definitely much more of the business guy at Juve. Like Marotta in his younger years, was more involved with selecting the players and whatnot, but he always was the finance guy, figured out, let's structure the deal this way, has great relationships with a lot of clubs and Italian agents. Marotta, I don't think it's the main reason why he left. I don't think Marotta was completely on board with the Ronaldo signing. I think spending so much on an older player was not kind of what he was all about. Now, I think for a variety of reasons, that was the right deal for Juve. Paratici, though, has always been the scout back on their days at Sampdoria. Now, Marotta is at Inter, and his version now of Paratici is Ausilio, who I think has done very well as a sporting director for Inter. He worked with Sabatini, who was there for a little while, kind of playing the Marotta role. But Sabatini is a great scout. Ausilio, Brozovic is his signing. There's different versions of who really discovered Lautaro Martinez, but the guy who got that deal done ultimately was Ausilio. So I think he's been a very underrated sporting director for a while. I think now Paratici, without having Marotta there, he's taking some hits. A lot of Juve fans are not happy with Paratici right now. So is it because Marotta's not there? I don't know if I'd go as far as that, but they were definitely a very good team. I think there were some times that, sometimes you need a boss who kind of pushes back when you have some ideas that you think are great. So I think they had a really good dynamic there. And now Paratici is really pretty much running the show. He's not had a particularly great year. I think that is fair to say. But to answer your question, Ausilio's been kind of that role at Inter for a while, and I think he deserves a lot of praise because Inter has a lot of talent. I think it's hard to deny that.
There was this question that you talked about in your podcast about Icardi, and I really like to talk about it here too. Conte is very unhappy with the depth of his squad, especially in midfield area. Couldn't he keep Icardi and then spend the money that he had on bringing in quality players in their midfield instead of spending money on Lukaku?
Maybe, but I think Conte is really all about the group and does not want any individual that takes away from the group. I think the argument that you're making, you can make a better case for Nainggolan. And I know that's different because you make a good point. They spent a lot on Lukaku. They could have spent that money elsewhere and just kept Icardi. But I really think there's no way Conte would have accepted to have Icardi on his team, knowing that his wife agent, Wanda Nara, goes on Italian TV every Sunday night on one of the biggest shows. A massive distraction, and I think Wanda gets too much hate there, but she is a big distraction. I think Conte absolutely did not want that. He's always been, anyone who feels they're bigger than the group, I don't want you. You can look at his squad selection when he went to the Euro with that Italy team. He'd rather have people that fit the collective better. So I think it was the right decision. I think Lukaku has been terrific for Inter. And look, Icardi is a great striker, has done well at PSG. I am not surprised. Inter is going to make likely a very nice profit on Icardi next year. Last summer they were finishing up the financial fair play requirements. I think at the end of the day, on the Icardi front, it worked out really well. Now, you could make an argument somewhat similar to what you were saying for Nainggolan, because after, recently you look at Inter squad and you're like, wow, the type of midfielder they're looking to buy right now is pretty much exactly Nainggolan. Now, Nainggolan had a really nice stretch for Cagliari. He got off to a slow start, hasn't been as good very recently. Do I think he's going to be great the rest of the season? Probably not. But he certainly would have helped Inter a little bit. I think maybe with Nainggolan, they went a step too far. Yeah, he likes to party, can be a little bit of a distraction, but nowhere near like Icardi. I mean, I wouldn't want to deal with Wanda Nara on my team.
I mean, so they're looking for Vidal from Barca right now. And as you just said, they are very close. They have very similar profiles, Vidal and Nainggolan, yeah.
Yeah, no, and look, if you think Juve Twitter is triggered now with Sarri, if Inter can somehow get Vidal, I think you're going to see a full mutiny. I'm in favor of anything that makes Serie A more competitive. I'm in favor of anything that makes the rivalry between Inter and Juve more heated. It's good for the league. If there a title race between Juve and Inter, which we have now, you throw in the mix Vidal at Inter, we are in for fireworks the rest of the season. I also think at that point, say Inter signs Vidal kind of in the beginning of the transfer window in January, I think then Juve is forced to respond somehow. Mm-hmm. So sign me up for that. I'd love to see it.
So I have another question about Conte. There's always question of him not being successful in European competitions. Both in Juve and Chelsea, he couldn't manage to meet fans' expectations, and it happened again this season in Inter against Barcelona. Why do you think is that? Is that a thing, or is it just accidents?
So I think there is something to it, but a couple of caveats. I think a lot of people forget that Conte's first season in the Champions League at Juve was actually quite good. They defeated Chelsea in the group substantially, made it to the quarterfinals, lost to Bayern, who ended up winning the treble, the best Bayern of the decade by far. That Juve was not very strong. I mean, they lost pretty decisively to Bayern, but I thought that Conte's first year in the Champions League was above average. Now, a lot of people remember, rightfully so, the disaster against Galatasaray. I think even more than that, once they went to the Europa League and the final was in Turin at Juventus Stadium, they had a great opportunity to win that trophy. Now, it's not the Champions League, but still, I think for Conte, it would have been a really nice win. At Chelsea, didn't do well in the Champions League. So, and at Inter this year now, I never thought Inter cared about the Champions League this season. I never did. I think they were all in on the Scudetto. So this year, I'm not going to really hold against them. So when I look, it's 4 years in the Champions League. One was good. One they punted. The other two, not good. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say it's not great. Now, at the same time, he was great at the Euro with Italy. I don't think that can be underestimated. I think, and I'm a huge fan of Conte as a manager, as his first season at Juve is his apex, and winning with Chelsea the first year was amazing. But right there with it is what he did with Italy in that Euro. So that makes me think that maybe he can be a good tournament coach. Now, in the Champions League specifically, I do think that 3-5-2 defense doesn't really work. We saw Juve, try to do it, and they did okay with some time with it. But I think you need to play a more free-flowing offense. I think the big test for Conte in the Champions League, I really want to see what he does next season. Because Inter, whether they win the Scudetto or not, next year, they're going to have the resources to build a squad that allows them to compete on both competition. So I'll say this: if next year Inter doesn't do well in the Champions League, then we can definitely write off Conte as a bad Champions League manager.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you see Inter chances to win the Serie A this year?
To me, it's kind of like in boxing. To beat the champ, you have to beat the champ. Inter, when Juve played Inter, I think they showed that they are definitely a notch above. The depth on Juve is definitely vastly superior. I think if you look at the starting 11s, they are not that far off, but Juve just has much more depth and they're used to winning. Let's see what the January window does. If Inter can get out of the January window with like one starter, two very good bench players that can bring depth, I think they can compete with Juve. But even if they do that, I'm still giving Juve 65% chance of winning the Scudetto. Again, keep in mind Chiellini has been out. They've been doing it without Ramsey and Douglas Costa. I don't think both will be healthy, but I think odds are one of them is. I know Juve is going to want to go deep in the Champions League, but I think losing the Super Cup might light a fire on the Juve's ass too. So I definitely think Inter has a chance. I'm not going to write them off, but I still think Juve deserves to be like a 65% favorite. I don't believe Lazio at all as a Scudetto contender as much as I tend to overrate them. I think Inter will give Juve a good run for their money though.
Okay, so Inter is on the right path, but AC Milan is having a lot of problems.
To say the least, yeah.
Yeah, they haven't been in Champions League for 6 seasons now, and the last time they won Serie A, it was 9 years ago. I want to start with the recent rumors that Bernard Arnault is trying to buy the club from Elliott. Do you think that these rumors are credible? And if he does, what could AC Milan fans expect from him? I mean, he's not going to be able to spend a lot of money because of all of the FFP regulations.
Okay, well, I hope to be really, really wrong on this because as someone who covers Serie A, I want Milan to be good. I think we really need it for the good of the league. But it is my theory, and again, I want to stress this is my theory, that as long as Berlusconi is alive, I don't think Milan will be good. And I think this man has such a big ego and is so immersed in Milan. And to me, the idea that there would be someone else succeeding with Milan while Berlusconi is alive is something Berlusconi is just not going to stand for. And I've said it from the first time we started hearing all these rumors of the Chinese owners, Mr. B and all, something just never added up to me. It never made any sense to me that there wouldn't be a very rich owner that wanted to take over Milan. Berlusconi has been in politics for years, knows people around the world. I have a very hard time believing that if he wanted to sell Milan to someone who would make Milan great again, that he couldn't find someone in the US and Russia and the Middle East to do it. I think that whole sale was very shady. I think it was some form of money laundering. So I hope to be really wrong, but I think Milan's going to kind of be in this limbo area for a while. And I think, I'm not saying Berlusconi is still the owner, but I think that whole sale was really weird. So no, I wish I was more optimistic about Milan. I hope these rumors, as you said, I don't know if they're credible or not. I know the Arnault Group has come out and denied them publicly. What else are they going to do? The Elliott Funds denied it. I don't know. I think it's just really sad, the situation Milan's in. I mean, you were talking about they haven't been in the Champions League for that long. I saw today ESPN tweeted that Ibrahimovic is their highest goal scorer for the decade. I mean, this guy was only 2 seasons. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about money laundering part, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to be in the interview. But yeah, it was very fishy, especially when you follow the amount of money that they transferred, like the money, the loan that Elliott gave to the Chinese
Yeah.
group never made sense to me. It was,
I mean, the minute you heard that Elliott Fund was the guarantee behind it, I mean, first of all, you should have had huge red flags well before this, but then the deal finally happens. And in the press release, they are saying that Elliott's guaranteeing the deal. Yeah, and again, I got a lot of hate from Milan fans, and I just rather be honest. I work in finance. I'm not saying that makes me like a huge expert in the deal by any means, but I have a decent understanding of all this. The whole situation looked really fishy for a long time, and I just don't think Berlusconi's ego can handle another owner doing great with Milan while he's alive. It's kind of sad, but I think that's kind of where we're at. And I think Berlusconi, like the Milan teams under Berlusconi, and I didn't grow up a Milan fan or some of the best teams I've ever seen. I grew up in Padova, where Milan is by far the most popular team. Like, I have a lot of affection for the team. But what's been happening recently just isn't right. Like, something just doesn't add up.
Yeah, I mean, and setting Berlusconi aside, it seems that there's also a lot of disagreement between Gazidis on one hand and Maldini on the other. I remember that last year Maldini and Leonardo were trying to bring likes of Fabregas, but Gazidis vetoed it because of their age. And now Maldini and Boban are trying to bring Zlatan, and Gazidis is again against it. I mean, who do you think is right? Don't you think that Milan squad needs a veteran player?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just don't know. I think this Gazidis versus Boban and Maldini is a good way to kind of explain situations. And I think, for clubs, as an example, I'm not surprised that today, after Milan got destroyed by Atalanta, there would be more buzz on Ibrahimovic. These are great carrots to dangle in front of the fans after a horrible loss and whatnot. So I just don't know. I think it's easy to make Gazidis into the bad guy, and the two former Milan legends, Boban and Maldini, these guys played for us. They want us to be great. Gazidis is just the business guy looking at like the balance sheet. I think it's kind of a little bit of a convenient storyline and all. That's just my impression. But to answer your question, I think someone like Ibrahimovic would help Milan. I think Fabregas would have helped in the past. At the same time, if I'm Zlatan Ibrahimovic, do I want to go to this Milan in this situation? I mean, what's really the upside? You're not going to get him back to the Champions League this season. I think there's much more chance of kind of ruining a little bit your legacy with Milan fans than much upside. That being said, I think Milan needs a personality like that for sure. They really could use a quality player, but I just don't see it. And again, I hope to be proven wrong, but I was always very skeptical, just as I'm always skeptical. And every time Milan starts talking about a new stadium, new San Siro, I'm always like, this looks like a great distraction strategy to me.
Oh, okay. So next question is about stadiums in Italy.
Okay.
Right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think only Juventus and Sassuolo have their own stadiums among all the Serie A teams.
So Atalanta just bought theirs, and Udinese got they basically pay €1 to the city at Udine, but in general, you are right. It's very, very few.
Okay, so 4 teams at the best among 20. Yeah, and so James Pallotta of AS Roma has been trying to build a new stadium for AS Roma, but he hasn't been able to convince the city council to let it be done. And same goes for both Inter and AC Milan. Why is it such a big problem in Italy?
I think Italian bureaucracy. I mean, you think Italian defenses and prime calcio are hard to kind of get by. Italian bureaucracy is like 3 times worse. Look, the politics in Italy are just really, really tough. I can just tell you this. I grew up in Italy. I love Italy. I love the Italian lifestyle. In an ideal world, I'd be there right now. My wife's 100% Italian. She loves Italy, but for work, it's just impossible. It's a country that is just so far behind the rest of the world. Like so many young people with talent just leave Italy, and it's really, really sad. In Italy, everyone is always just worried about the short term, their little piece of whatever they have. There's no forward thinking, big thinking. So, no. To answer your questions, the cities own the stadiums, they receive rent from the teams. They'd rather do that instead of forward thinking and be like, okay, well, what if the club in our city owned their stadiums, had more revenues, were a great success? Like, people travel from all over the world to go to Juve Stadium. Like, you look at the games, Juve, they don't sell out the games because fans are really spoiled. But there's fans from all over the world that travel to watch Juve, and still today at San Siro. So if cities were kind of forward thinking, they would say, okay, you know what? If the team in our city owned their stadiums, they had more revenues, they put on a better product, we'd have more people visiting our city. But no, that's not the Italian way. They don't think in those terms. They're like, you know what? This team's paying us rent for this year. Let's keep the rent going. It's really sad. I don't see this particularly changing. Now Juve and Atalanta and Udinese and Spal all like basically Juve demolished the Delle Alpi, rebuilt on the exact lot where it was. Atalanta closed their stadium for a while. They're redoing section by section. Udinese did the same. That's what you have to do, but it's really kind of sad. It's just a backwards country. I mean, we see this with the racism issues and whatnot. They just can't help themselves. They just think so much more in the short term and their little piece of the puzzle instead of thinking more long term. So it's kind of sad.
And what do you think will finally happen to San Siro? Because City wants to rebuild it and use it for Primavera games and women games and also having concerts in it. But the two clubs disagree, and they want to just demolish it and build a new stadium, just like Juventus did with the Dalpi.
I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I'd be willing to bet that if we did this interview in 5 years again, we'd be exactly in the same situation. I think especially for Milan, it's great to talk about the stadium, give fans hope, say, oh, we'll own our own stadium, we'll have more revenues, it'll be better. I don't buy it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times have we seen all these sites run articles on the best games to take place at San Siro, the best concerts to take place at San Siro. They'll demolish it, and then 2 years after, we're still at square one. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't see it. I mean, I was recently in Milan. I walked by San Siro. You could keep it there and build right next to it. I hope that happens, but I'd be very surprised. Look, I think San Siro, to be honest, is still a great place for a game. I mean, they definitely need to renovate it. Anyone that's been at the bathrooms at San Siro will tell you they need to renovate it. But I don't think that's really the problem. There are plenty of other teams that could use a new stadium. I mean, I think the Olimpico at Roma, the San Paolo at Napoli, that needs to be redone well before San Siro. I just think a lot of times stadiums are a great distraction topic when things are going poorly.
And James Pallotta recently, I read the article recently that apparently he thinks that AS Roma worth $1 billion. And he's planning to sell the club. Do you think that is true? He really thinks that AS Roma worth $1 billion?
I think more like 800 million minus the 230 in debt that they have. So I think in an ideal world, he'd like to sell around 600 million. Now, keep in mind, I mean, Roma is a much better brand since Pallotta took it over. This is a club that's made a lot of headway. Can be understated how great Roma's social media team is. And, I'm biased because I'm friends with most of them. I mean, they've done incredible work. I think like Roma is one of the best brand names in Serie A. I think there's a lot of people that have affection for Roma, even though they didn't grow up as Roma fans. I think in general, big clubs have good valuations because I think the sports world where we look at how everything is moving on demand, like you can watch movies, TV series on demand. You still have to watch the game live because you will have it spoiled if not. Pallotta's a great businessman. I think he's going to be able to sell for a very good price, but he will retain a decent amount of the club. I don't think he'll be the majority owner. I think what you'll see is something similar to what Toir did with Inter, where he sold to Suning, kept a percentage for a while, eventually sold it all. So I think a billion, no. I think 800, 700 million minus all the huge debt he inherited. I think that's realistic. I mean, keep in mind, Roma plays in one of the biggest tourist attractions in all of Europe. I think Roma has done a really good job through social media and all to raise brand awareness with the team. So not a billion, but let's say 750 million minus the debt. So he nets 500 million, something like that, and he retains for a while a portion of it. I think that's realistic.